Now, I know some people want me to bypass Congress and change the laws on my own. Believe me. And believe me, right now, dealing with Congress, the idea...
That was a tough one. That was the president getting heckled last year when he was addressing the National Council of La Raza. And this summer, those dreamers had their demands met, at least in part with the deferred action for childhood arrivals ordered by President Obama. So far, 310,000 young people have applied. And that action may, in fact, have bore fruit for the president on election night when he took home 71% of the Latino vote. Yet, no comprehensive immigration reform has even been attempted by the Obama administration. And many are still looking to the president for leadership on the issue. Back with my panel. So, Raul, I'm interested in this because this is a moment where, on the one hand, you have them heckling, but the next moment they do, basically, what I actually think is a page from the Republican handbook, they hand to him a policy. And they're like, here, if you can't get DREAM Act through, do this.
Right.
And sure enough, he does it, and we end up with deferred action. Is that the model for how we're going to get immigration reform done?
Well, you know what? I have to give those dreamers credit because what they did, you know, they enlisted a lot of constitutional scholars and law professors, and they presented the White House and the president with documents saying this is a legal way that you can do what we want you to do. And meanwhile, they were out there chaining themselves to the White House, and this is in the thick of the campaign, you know, staging demonstrations at his campaign offices. So this was like true grassroots activism, and they affected this change. And now, you know, for better or worse, the pressure is going to be on because this issue, you know, obviously the Latino community has a great stake in it, you know, and so people do expect him to follow through and make something happen. And I always tell people, maybe I'm too optimistic, but I do think it's going to happen, not only because of that pressure, but also because I think Obama is going to be thinking about his legacy, and this could be historic.
You know, Dorian, it just felt like the most sophisticated. I wanted to write this down in a little handbook, right? When making critique of president, here's how you do it, right? You provide a policy pathway, you provide the public, you know, push right outside, but then you also provide the electoral support, like all three of those, and then the next thing you know, you end up with policy. It really is sort of a textbook way of thinking about it, but it's still not comprehensive because you must, I mean, the president isn't wrong. You must have Congress come along on this.
Yes, and the president has, and every indication is that the president is very supportive. He said repeatedly since the election, both publicly and in private conversations that have been released to the press, that this is one of his top issues. But on another level, it doesn't matter if he says this because the movement is going to push him to do it. And it's a very strong and unified movement. It's not just the Dreamers. It's not just Latino organizations. It's civil rights organizations, it's the labor movement, it's evangelicals, it's even parts of the business community. So there will be immigration reform in 2013, and the president will be forced to sign something that gets through Congress, whether he wants to or not. And it's clear he does want to.
Right, and it appears that he wants to. And yet the DREAM Act, I mean, you know, here we are in lame duck again, and lame duck in 2010 was the great exciting moment for progressives where like 1,000 things that hadn't happened, you know, finally happened. And yet no conversation in this particular lame duck about another DREAM Act again.
No, and let's keep it in mind. I mean, I'm not as optimistic about you about the future of legislation. In the context of the immigration policy problem, let's say, in the United States, Dreamers and the DREAM Act is symbolic. It affects a lot of people, and that's very important, but ultimately it's symbolic in a universe where we have 10 or 11 million or however many people living in the shadows, and we only have 140,000 visas a year. What the hell is that, right? In any situation where you have...
It's that history, right? I mean, it's this...
It is that history. It is, let's bureaucratize this kind of stuff, and let's not look at this as a solution of expand the number. That's about the same number as Australia. I think we're a bigger country. I think the economy is a little bit bigger, but people are not talking about that. Instead, we have this absurd situation where we can basically get 10,000 visas a year from Mexico. I'm from Southern California. You can fit those 10,000 visas in about half of Long Beach, where I'm from. Right? It doesn't begin to make sense, and people aren't talking about that. And I don't think Obama is pressured to deal with this because he just got 4 more percentage points.
So in other words, this is the artificial crisis, right? It's not the crisis of insufficient visas is created by our actual policy, a thing that we could sort of, with the stroke of a pen, change.
Yes, with legislation. But let's also
with the stroke of a legislative pen.
But the one issue is, like all issues that are difficult, they're difficult for a reason. It's tough to get there politically, and it's also a tough policy program. But I think the easiest way to go about it is, let's get those numbers of visas way up there so that it reflects at least some bit of reality, and let's stop criminalizing human existence.
And there's a business push on this as well, right?
There's a business push, and frankly, there's going to be a fight. Even though business is on the same side as the immigrant rights movement, there will be a fight between business and those groups, because business will probably, the Chamber of Commerce and others, will want a more conservative kind of immigration reform. But just to back up to your textbook example, what's important about this discussion is that 15 years ago, this was not in the mainstream of discourse. And it was a small group of activists who dreamed about what immigration reform could look like and started organizing and pushing it. And so 15 years later, their theory of change has come true in terms of
with a little t, at least.
Well, yes, yes. But in terms of knowing how immigration affects millions of people, thinking through how those people can be mobilized into an electorate that would vote on this question. And now we're all discussing immigration reform.
But now there's also 1,000 deportations a day.
I'm going to take a quick break here, but I'm bringing into the conversation both on the issue of the pressure on the president, but also we saw an action by the Republican Party this week. And I think it leads us to the question of whether both parties are, in fact, under a lot of pressure on this question of immigration reform when we come back.